Alright, what is up guys, it's Zero here, and today I have for you a very late deck profile for Link Joker. This was because I pulled 0 guard stars, and I needed to play rank for them, and I just got my 4 copies like a day, probably like from the time of this video, like 2 days ago, but that's the point. I got them pretty recently, and so I thought I'd do a deck profile first. So there are 2 builds for the deck. The build that plays the reverse units and the build that doesn't. Today I'll showcase the build that does play the reverse units because honestly speaking, the build that doesn't play it is relatively straightforward. I think other people have done it already, so I figured I'd do something a little different. I will actually have a free-to-play version of free-to-play Legion Link Joker deck right after this video, so expect that in a few days. In that video, I'll just briefly go over the non the non-Worldline version of the list that's not free to play, but yeah, expect that in a few days. Expect the list that requires 0 gacha cards in a few days from the Joker. But today we will be looking at the Worldline list, so without further ado, here's the list. This is what I ended up with. I'm not saying I haven't put too much testing into this, but I am confident that this is relatively what it should look like. I'll go over why I play certain cards as usual, why I don't play certain cards as usual, and yeah. So first off, the starter is the Worldline Dragon. The starter that was supposed to be used with the Glendios, but it's being thrown to other stuff now because his skill is Vanguard or Soul. Start of your turn, if your Vanguard isn't a grade 3 yet, you can discard a reverse unit, check top 5, add a card from under to your hand, and if you added a reverse unit, you add a copy of that same card back to your deck. So the reason why this card is considered for this deck is because it fills your drop zone up with triggers while also digging you cards you actually want in your hand, whether it be your ride targets, intercepts, boosters, whatever. This card just digs off top 5, trades your triggers in hand that you can put back later with Legion. So yeah, that's why this card is even in consideration for this deck. So yeah, obviously you play the starter if you're playing this version of the deck. If you don't, you play a different starter. Grade ones, no new cards actually for this list. 4 Palladiums. His skill is at the start of your turn, if something was unlocked, you can CB1 to put him in the soul and relock that unit. So the relocker of this deck. So yeah, he's your primary he's your primary cheap way to relock a card or keep a card locked for an extra turn, because as you can see in this list, I'm not playing the Osmium, nor am I playing the Imaginary Plane. So I think the deck needs some way to relock a card, and Palladium is the best way to do it if you're not playing the Osmium. So yeah. I'll explain why I'm not playing Osmium and Magic Plane later after this video. Yeah, that's it for that. 4 Palladiums, 4 Neon, 10k attacker, front row Vanguard Circle. If your Vanguard is a Starvader, plus 3k. So, reason why I max out on the Neon over something like the Lanthium, which scales better, is because with Neon, a lot of times you just need something to swing with, and Lanthium, unless you can lock on that turn, is just a 7k booster. It can't swing anything unboosted. The Neon is something that can swing into intercept unboosted at very least. So yeah, I really do value cards that can swing unboosted in this deck, and that's why I choose up to play for the Neons of the Lanthium. And speaking of Lanthium, he's just a one of something block plus 3k. He can be a solo attacker on your lock turns, but early on sometimes you just want something that can swing by itself. So that's why I put the Neon over the Lanthium. If you want more of this, you can cut the Neon instead. This card definitely still a very good card. I just value the Neon a little bit more right now. And finally, 4 PGs. Nothing really special here. It's 4 PGs. You play 4 PGs in every deck. You play 4 PGs in this deck too. There isn't even another PG you could play for Link Joker, but it is a Starvader name, so you can use it to pay for costs that require you to discard. Onwards to grade 2, I'm playing for the Photon. So his skill is on play. If your Vanguard is a Starvader, CB2 lock card. Very simple. It's a Blaster Blade that locks, if you want to look at it like that. CB2 lock card, very nice. Gives you a way to lock early in the game, and gives you a way to lock outside of your grade 3s, which is actually very good. This card did get changed when it wasn't in TCG. I wouldn't call it a buff or a nerf. I would just call it changed because they actually do very different things now. Before, if this card came in as it was in TCG but with like a CB1 hypothetically, it'd be like a cheap way to lock something else. But this card is just a lock whenever you want it. So yeah, I think this card is actually very nice to have in the deck. Even if I wasn't playing Garnets, I'd still play 4 of this card. Like even if I were to just play like the old Chaos Breaker deck, you would still play 4 of it. With like Chaos, Nebula, and Infinite Zero, you'd still play 4 of this card. If your Glendios plays this card now because it's a way to lock a card whenever you want. This card is just very, very good. I'll go over this card next. The the Radon, 12k attacker, Vanguard the Starvader during your turn. Solo attackers again are very useful in this deck, and he is a solo attacker, so that's why I play 4 of him. Not much else to say. Solo attacker can scale 19 if you're going first if you wanted to aggro. So yeah, pretty good card. Very nice in a deck like this that can struggle to put boosters out a lot of times. And 4 of the Magnet Hollow. So this card was a card that I initially wasn't playing. My initial draft, I was playing 3 Osmium and 2 Colony Makers, and then I had 2 Imaginary Planes in the deck. But after a bit of playing, I just found that Imaginary Planes cost was way too expensive for a lot of the times, as well as Osmium needing you to have the 3 Counterblast on the turn that you lock, or 1 extra Counterblast on the turn you lock, sometimes just isn't amazing. A lot of times you have like the Osmium and a Photon, and you like lock something with a Photon, but you only had the 2 Counterblasts that turn, and you just couldn't use the Osmium to relock that card for an extra turn. So sometimes that can be a locker sometimes, but I just personally find that needing to have the Counterblast on that turn is sometimes can get a little awkward. That's what's the Palladium, where your opponent can play a turn out, you could take like a damage, and then the Palladium could still, then you have the Counterblast at the start of your turn. The downside to that obviously is that they can retire the Palladium, but that is a downside I'm willing to take over the Osmium. But that has nothing to do with Magnet Hall. I'm just playing, I'm not playing those cards anymore, but Magnet Hall skills Vanguard Rare on hit if your Vanguard the Starvader, CB1 search deck for a reverse unit. The way I look at this card is, this card early on is a CB1 +1 that like, yes, you're taking a trigger out of your deck, but the thing is, as long as you're not already on grade 3, you just ditch the card you searched for a better card off the top 5. So that's why I think the Magnet Hollow is worth playing, because and then it is a CV1 +1. It's a relatively cheap plus, and then it's a relatively wide selection plus because you ditch it and you can add a card off the top 5 of your deck. So I think being a cheap plus is really nice for this deck. And later on in the game, you can just search the Cradle to ditch for cost later on, or just search as an attacker for the following turn. The CV1 is relatively cheap, so yeah. That's why I personally opt to play 4 of this. If you don't like this card, you definitely could choose to not play it. But I think that having a relatively cheap plus is really nice, because this deck isn't that counterblast heavy anymore, considering Garnet Star is free, Photon is CB2, and then Blind is CB1, that's basically it. So I think that can actually afford the 1 counterblast for the Magnet Hollow. And finally, 1 Colony Maker. On play, if your opponent has a locked card, CB1 to call a grade 1 Starvader. Still a nice card, again, cheap. It's cheap plus, can guard you Palladium. I'm not too hot on this card sometimes, just because I sometimes rather have to kind of let's go towards something else. Let's say like the Palladium, but then you call the Palladium, but yeah, it's a card that I wish I could play more of, but I value all these other grade 2s more. If you want to keep villas similar to mine, but you don't want to play but you want to play more Colony Makers, I would suggest cutting the Magnet Hollows over the Photon or the Radon. So yeah, you definitely play around vision stuff. This is just what I ended up liking. Yeah, so that's it for the grade 2s. Finally, the grade 3s, the Garnet Star. So his skill is first he Legions with Photon, play CB2 lock. Skill is on Legion, discard a Starvader to lock 1 front row, lock 1 back row, and when he attacks the Vanguard plus 2k. So lock for no counterblast is really nice. Having a ditch hands kind of sucks, but what can you do? What can you do? Still a really good card, because it is counter blastless lock. So even if you put through a counterblast, you can just rewrite this and you can get a lock off anyway. Really good card. Definitely the better of the 2 Legions between this and the Imaginary Plane. So yeah, that's why I definitely opt to play this instead. Also, nice that his mate is actually really good too. Next off is the I'll go over the one first, because the other cards are just pretty much just for name. My one up is Chaos Breaker, just because again I didn't want to play Imaginary Plane, because 1, I didn't like his cost. See, I think CB2 ditch 1 card is really expensive, and I don't like it at all. Again, and I didn't want to play his mate either. So because I wanted to try stuff like more colonies and more Magnet Hollows, and I ended up liking more Magnet Hollows, so I didn't want to play. I didn't want to just play 1 copy or 2 copies of his mate, because having low counts of mates can be a little risky sometimes. So yeah, that's why I chose to play the 1 Chaos. Limit Break 4, start of your turn, and then got unlock CB1 to retire it and draw a card. And then other skills, once per turn, CB1 ditch 2 Starvaders to lock a card. So yeah, Chaos still a pretty good card. It is CB1 ditch 2 to lock 1, but if you use this Limit Break, you can draw 1 back, so it becomes CB1 drop 3 CB1 drop 1 to lock it essentially. So I think Chaos is still a pretty okay ride. obviously it's a terrible first ride, but it's a card. It's a fifth ride in. It's a fifth card in your deck that you can ride and not feel too bad. But other cards you can play is obviously you can play Imaginary Planes if you want to play, if you made space for his mate instead. Infinite Zero is the final one of, but I personally like the one Chaos. That's all I can play. And then the other 8 cards are all just reverse units. Although it is important to note that the Cradle should absolutely be 4 of said reverse units. Oh yeah, you could also just play a 9th reverse unit here instead of the Chaos, but I personally like having the Chaos. So yeah. It is important to note that you do play 4 Cradles as your reverse units, not because his text is relevant in any way whatsoever. It's because he's a Starbaiter, so he can also be discard fodder. So that's why if you want to play this deck, you definitely need 4 Cradles. I definitely would not recommend playing this list if you're actually just threw in like 8 random reverse units. Yeah. And the last card for me is the Rebirth. This last slot doesn't matter what it is. I just like Rebirth, so I'm playing Rebirth in this slot. So yeah. So that's it. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Do I remember what I wanted to say? No, I guess I don't. If I don't remember, it probably wasn't very important. So yeah. This is the deck profile. This is the deck. Tell me guys what you think about it down below in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Some games for you guys as per usual. And expect the free-to-play version of this deck in a few days. And I will see you guys next time. Peace out.